The road that led Ethan to this moment wasn't paved with honor or triumph, but with sheer determination and the kind of hard-earned wisdom that only struggle could teach. When he signed up for the Marines, it wasn't out of some deep-rooted sense of patriotism or family obligation. It was desperation. A need to break free from the suffocating monotony of a small town that seemed permanently stuck in a slow, dreary cycle. His father's garage reeked of motor oil and failure, a place where broken things piled up faster than they were ever fixed. His mother's hands were rough, calloused from years of work that never led to prosperity, just survival. Ethan had seen firsthand what staying in that place did to a person, and he refused to let that be his future. Boot camp tore him down piece by piece, stripping away everything he thought he was and rebuilding him into something unrecognizable, a man shaped by discipline, precision, and the cold necessity of emotional detachment. He learned how to move like a ghost, to endure discomfort without a sound, and to steady his breath enough to make every shot count, no matter the pressure. The first time he pulled the trigger on the range, something inside him clicked. It wasn't just about skill, it felt like instinct, a purpose that had been waiting for him all along. But war was nothing like the stories. The fantasy of heroism disintegrated the moment he stepped into reality. There was no cinematic glory, only the raw, brutal chaos of combat. He had seen men hardened, trained soldiers, reduced to nothing more than terrified boys calling for their mothers. He had heard the bitter, hollow laughter of those who had narrowly escaped death one too many times. Fear and guilt clung to him like a second skin, but he had learned to shove them so deep inside himself that they wouldn't interfere with the mission. Survival depended on that. Over the years, Ethan's reputation as a sniper grew. He didn't take pride in it. It wasn't about personal glory. Every target eliminated meant lives were saved on their side. When he received the dossier marked with a single name, Falcon, there was no hesitation. The mission was clear: neutralize the threat. Falcon wasn't just another high-value target. His reign of terror had made him infamous, not just among the Marines, but among the civilians who lived in the shadow of his brutality. This wasn't just another mission. It was the kind of kill that changed things. Ethan spent weeks dissecting Falcon's movements, studying the subtle patterns that made him so difficult to track. The man was careful, elusive, almost mythical. But even ghosts could be caught if you knew where to look. Now, Ethan lay motionless beneath the punishing desert sun, half buried in grit, waiting for the right moment. The air shimmered with heat, distorting everything in sight, but he remained focused, his rifle an extension of himself. Through the scope, he locked onto the crumbling structure in the distance, the stronghold where Falcon had made himself untouchable. But today, that illusion would end. Wind shift. 1 o'clock. Light breeze, Corporal Ramirez's voice whispered through his earpiece. Ethan adjusted his scope, eyes fixed on the compound's entrance. Hours crawled by before the first movement. 2 tangos, Ramirez murmured. Ethan's finger rested lightly on the trigger as 2 armed men stepped out. Neither was Falcon. He exhaled slowly, his heartbeat steady, his body locked in place. The minutes dragged. Then, finally, the doorway darkened with a familiar silhouette. Ethan recognized him instantly. Sharp features. Eyes that radiated cruelty. That's him, Ramirez confirmed. Range, 800 meters. Wind, 2 o'clock, 3 knots. Ethan made the necessary adjustments, his breathing measured. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. The crosshairs settled on Falcon's chest. The shot rang out, a clean, precise execution. Through the scope, Ethan watched Falcon crumple, the life draining from him before his body even hit the ground. The guards panicked, searching the horizon, but they would never find him. Target down, Ramirez confirmed, but Ethan already knew. Pack it up, Ethan ordered, his limbs stiff from hours of stillness. Quickly, they dismantled their hide, slipping away toward the extraction point. As they moved, Ethan took a moment to reflect. Falcon was his 18th confirmed kill. He felt no thrill, no sense of victory, just a cold, grim understanding. This was necessary. More lives had been spared because of it. The distant hum of an approaching Blackhawk broke the silence. Soon, the desert would erase all traces of what had happened here. For over a year, Ethan had called this merciless landscape home. Sandstorms, sleepless nights, the constant pull of death, it had all become routine. His rifle had become as much a part of him as his own hands. But what weighed on him more than the missions, more than the enemies he had taken down, was the relentless ache for home. He missed Vanessa. He missed Sophia. His wife and daughter had become blurry memories, frozen in the last photos he had of them. Calls had grown infrequent, strained by the distance and time between them. But through it all, one image anchored him, a picture of Sophia in her ballet costume, her little face beaming with pride as Vanessa stood beside her. That was his reason. That was his tether. 7 more days. Then he would be home. When the plane finally touched down on American soil, Ethan inhaled deeply. The air felt different here, alive in a way the desert never could be. He slung his duffel over his shoulder, scanning the airfield, searching for them. Vanessa and Sophia. They weren't there. The cab ride home was a blur, his mind filled with anticipation, unease creeping in despite himself. When the car finally rolled to a stop in front of their house, Max, their aging Labrador, greeted him with frantic barks. Ethan knelt, running a hand through the dog's fur. "Miss me, buddy?" The dog whined, licking at his face, but inside, the house was eerily silent. Something was off. Ethan dropped his bag, his boots echoing down the hallway. Something was wrong. His gut tightened as he pushed open Sophia's door. She lay still under the blankets and 4 in her small hand. His heart clenched. "Sophia," he whispered, rushing to her side. "It's Daddy. Wake up." Her eyelids fluttered, a weak smile forming. "Daddy." She threw her arms around his neck. He held her close, his throat tightening. "What's going on, sweetheart? Why do you have this? Are you okay?" Sophia's voice was soft. "I'm okay, just a little sick. The doctor said I'll get better soon." Ethan frowned. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Where's Mommy?" Sophia hesitated before whispering, "She's out." "Out where?" Her lip quivered. "With her boyfriend." "Derek." Ethan went rigid. "Her what?" Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "I heard Mommy talking to him. She said when you find out she's pregnant with his baby, you'd get mad. Then they'd say you're dangerous and put you in jail." His hands clenched into fists before he forced himself to stay calm. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. Sophia nodded, tears spilling. "Please, Daddy, don't hurt anyone. Just take me away. Leave Mommy." Ethan cupped her face. "I swear, I'll protect you." Leaving her to rest, he walked into the living room and called Major Davidson. "Ethan," Davidson answered. "What's going on?" "My wife's pregnant by another man and planning to frame me. My daughter overheard everything. I found Sophia alone, sick, hooked 2 and 4. Davidson's tone sharpened. "Stay calm. Don't give them ammunition. Call CPS immediately and get a lawyer." "Understood. Thank you, sir." Ethan returned to Sophia's side. "It'll be okay, sweetheart. Trust me." Then he dialed Child Protective Services. After 2 rings, a woman answered. "CPS, this is Natalie Shaw. How can I help?" "My name is Ethan Grayson. I just came home from deployment to find my daughter sick and neglected. Her mother is too preoccupied with her boyfriend to care for her. I need help." Natalie's voice turned serious. "Where are you?" "I'll be there immediately." 30 minutes later, Natalie arrived, clipboard in hand. Ethan laid everything out, Sophia's condition, the 4, Vanessa's absence. As he spoke, Natalie's expression hardened. "I need to speak with Sophia," she said. She knelt beside the little girl. "Hi, Sophia. I'm here to help. Can you tell me how you feel?" Sophia hesitated. "I've been sick a long time. Mommy doesn't take care of me. She's always with her boyfriend." "When was the last time you saw a doctor?" 3 weeks ago. Mommy's friend does this." She pointed to the 4. Natalie's jaw tightened. "You're very brave. I'll make sure you're safe." She turned to Ethan. "This is unacceptable. We're taking action now." She stepped outside, made calls, then returned with papers. "This is an emergency restraining order. Fill it out now." Ethan didn't hesitate. He was nearly finished when the doorbell rang. Daniel Whitman, his lawyer and longtime friend, stepped in. "Thanks for coming," Ethan said, introducing him to Natalie. Daniel quickly assessed the situation. "The restraining order is a good start. We'll file for custody next. Document everything," Natalie added. "Texts, calls, proof of neglect. It'll be processed tonight," Daniel assured him. Ethan exhaled, the tension in his chest easing slightly. "Thank you. I just want her safe." "She will be," Natalie promised. Later that evening, Dr. Mitchell arrived, examining Sophia thoroughly. "She needs more tests. Bring her to the clinic tomorrow. Keep her hydrated and rested for now." Ethan thanked him and returned to Sophia's side, gripping her small hand. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered. Then, the front door creaked open. Ethan, sitting in the dimly lit living room, his firearm resting on his lap, tensed. Vanessa and Derek stumbled in, laughing until they saw him. Vanessa's face paled. "Ethan, what are you doing?" He stood slowly, his voice cold. "Stop right there." He lifted the firearm slightly, not aiming, just making a point. "This ends now." Derek raised his hands. "Hey, man, let's talk this out, Al." "Don't take another step," Ethan cut in. He tossed a folded paper onto the table. "That's a restraining order, Vanessa. You're not welcome here. I'm filing for divorce first thing in the morning. Leave, or I call the cops." Vanessa's expression twisted in fury. "You can't do this. I'll tell everyone you threatened me." Ethan smirked and tapped his phone, sitting in plain view on the table. The screen was recording. "Go ahead. Everything's documented." Derek scoffed. "You can't just kick her out." Ethan's voice was calm, but absolute. "This is my house. Sophia's safety comes first. Get out." Vanessa stepped forward, her eyes burning. "What are you going to do? Shoot me?" "Don't push me," Ethan warned, voice steady. "Walk out, or I call the police." Vanessa hesitated, then grabbed Derek's arm. "Come on," she spat. She glared at Ethan. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," he said, his voice cool. "But not tonight." The doors slammed behind them. Ethan exhaled, lowering the firearm as his hands trembled. He knew this wasn't over. But Sophia was safe. That was all that mattered. That night, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The dim glow from the bedside lamp cast long, shifting shadows across the walls, the silence pressing against him like a weight. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, a steady whisper that did nothing to calm the storm inside him. His mind refused to rest, churning over everything that had happened: Vanessa's betrayal, her neglect of Sophia, the danger his daughter had been left in while he was fighting a war halfway across the world. The rage simmered, dark and dangerous. Revenge was an easy path, one that whispered to him in the quiet moments, but Sophia's face always brought him back. He had nothing left for Vanessa but contempt, but his daughter needed him whole, not broken by anger. Still, sleep didn't come easy. His body ached with exhaustion, but his mind refused to let go. Only in the early hours of the morning did he finally drift into a restless, uneasy sleep. When the news of Vanessa's dismissal came, it was delivered with all the warmth of a corporate rejection letter. She sat at the kitchen table of her rented apartment, staring at the email in stunned silence. "Dear Mrs. Grayson, after careful consideration, we regret to inform you that your employment has been terminated, effective immediately. We wish you success in your future endeavors." Her hands trembled as she shut the laptop, her face burning with humiliation and anger. She didn't need to ask why. The whispers at the office, the judgmental looks, it had all been leading to this. The affair, the scandal, the way she had so openly abandoned her marriage and her daughter, it was too much. She had made herself toxic. Later that day, Derek stormed into their apartment, slamming the door behind him and tossing his bag onto the floor. His face was flushed with rage. "They fired me too," he spat, pacing like a caged animal. "Said I'm bad for business. Unethical conduct, can you believe that?" Vanessa buried her face in her hands. "This is all falling apart," she muttered. Derek scoffed. "What am I supposed to do now? I took a risk for you, Vanessa, and now I'm paying for it." She shot him a glare. "Don't act like you're innocent. You knew exactly what this was." His hands clenched at his sides. "Yeah, and maybe we should have thought this through before blowing up your marriage." His words cut deeper than she expected. The weight of everything settled over her like a crushing force. For the first time, she truly understood the depth of her loss, not just her job, but her reputation, her stability, her family. Meanwhile, Ethan sat stiffly in a small office across from a court-appointed counselor. His arms were crossed over his chest, his posture rigid. "So," the counselor began, her voice calm, measured. "Tell me why you're here today." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Because the court ordered it." The counselor nodded, unfazed. "Let's talk about your daughter." His expression softened slightly. "Sophia's been sick. Vanessa was too busy with her boyfriend to care for her. My daughter was neglected, left to suffer alone." His voice hardened again. "I can't forgive that." "Vanessa has expressed remorse," the counselor said carefully. "She's willing to attend counseling. Wouldn't it be better for Sophia if you two worked together?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "You think I should trust her? After everything she's done?" "She's not sorry, she's playing the victim." The counselor studied him. "I understand your anger, but trust can be rebuilt. You don't get it, Ethan snapped. She's not looking for redemption. She's looking for an angle. A way to manipulate her way back in. Vanessa's choices were destructive, the counselor acknowledged, but shutting her out completely could affect Sophia's relationship with her mother. Ethan's eyes darkened. I'm a Marine. I don't let pain stop me. I move forward. Vanessa isn't getting another chance. He stood abruptly. Thanks for the chat, but I'm done here. Without another word, he walked out. The next morning, Ethan stepped onto the porch, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as he bent to pick up the newspaper. As he unfolded it, a headline caught his attention. Man found dead, possible loan shark connection. His pulse quickened as he scanned the article. The name wasn't familiar, but the circumstances were. He had dealt with men like this before, predators lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to collect. They were dangerous, relentless. And now, an idea took root in his mind. He turned back into the house, shutting the door behind him as he reached for his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen before he finally made the call. The line rang twice before Daniel answered. Ethan, his voice was cautious, as if he already knew something was wrong. What's going on? Ethan's voice was steady, but his mind was racing. I've got an idea. It's about the loan sharks. That guy in the paper, I know his type. This could work. A long silence stretched between them before Daniel spoke. Ethan, stop. This isn't the way. You're about to cross a line you can't come back from. I don't care anymore, Ethan said, his tone cold. Vanessa deserves to pay for what she's done. Daniel exhaled sharply. And you think this is how? You're risking everything. Your custody case. Your career. Sophia. Is she worth throwing that away for revenge? Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. This is the only way. The line was quiet for a long time before Daniel finally said, I won't support this. But if you need me, I'll be here. Just think before you act. The call ended, leaving Ethan staring at the phone, his mind spiraling. He had spent his life calculating risks, planning every move. But this was different. This was personal. Ethan had made his choice. That evening, he and Daniel stepped into the cave, a smoky, dimly lit bar where the air hung heavy with the stench of whiskey and stale cigarettes. The murmur of hushed voices filled the space, secrecy and tension woven into the atmosphere. Ethan scanned the room, his sharp eyes searching for the kind of men who thrived in the shadows. Daniel leaned in, his voice low with urgency. Ethan, this is insane. We need to leave before we do something we can't undo. Ethan ignored him, his attention fixed on a group of men at the back. Their movements were deliberate, their gazes cautious as they whispered among themselves. Relax, Ethan said, his tone firm. We're just here to talk. Talk? Daniel scoffed. You think that's all this will be? Before Ethan could reply, a towering figure emerged from the shadows, his presence sending ripples through the room. He approached, stopping just short of them. His expression was unreadable. The boss wants to see you. Daniel stiffened beside him, gripping Ethan's arm. This is it. Let's walk away. Ethan didn't move. He nodded to the man. Lead the way. With one sharp look from Ethan, Daniel fell silent. There was no turning back now. They were led through a dark corridor into a private room draped with thick velvet curtains. The scent of cigars lingered in the air. At the far end, an imposing man sat in a leather chair, radiating an air of power and control. As they entered, the man stood, his movements slow and deliberate. Then, to Ethan's surprise, he grinned widely. God, it's been ages. He strode forward and enveloped Ethan in a bear hug, lifting him briefly off the ground. Ethan smirked. Good to see you, Tony. Been a while. Tony stepped back, his grin unwavering. You're the reason I'm still standing. Back in Baghdad, you pulled me out of hell. I owe you everything. He turned to the men in the shadows. This is Ethan Grayson, the real deal. The others nodded, their sharp eyes assessing him. Tony gestured toward a table covered in expensive liquor. Drink? Daniel hesitated, his discomfort clear. Tony chuckled. Relax. You're with Ethan, so you're with me. Ethan took the offered glass, nodding toward Daniel as a reassurance. They raised their drinks, but as the mood lightened, Tony's tone darkened, the charm laced with an unspoken warning. Ethan's enemies are my enemies. The words hung in the air, pressing down on them like a vice. Daniel stiffened, but Ethan met Tony's gaze without flinching. This was where it began. The first step in a plan Vanessa would never see coming. Ethan recounted everything: Vanessa's affair, her neglect of Sophia, the betrayal that left his daughter sick and alone. As he spoke, Tony's expression darkened, his jaw tightening with each word. Damn, Tony muttered. That's low, Ethan. You deserve better. His gaze sharpened. Say the word, and I'll take care of it. Vanessa, her lover gone. No questions asked. The offer hung in the air, thick with finality. Ethan had expected it, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. He didn't flinch, but a part of him recoiled at how easy the choice could be. A long silence followed. Then, Daniel finally spoke, his voice careful. Tony, this isn't the way. Tony turned to him, his expression unreadable. Daniel continued, if Vanessa and Derek disappear, the cops will be all over Ethan. It's too risky. Ethan shot him a sharp look. I've thought it through. They won't get away with this, but we need to be smart. Tony raised a hand, signaling for calm. Daniel's right. We can't leave a mess. But I've got ways to make it clean. He leaned in slightly. An accident. No loose ends. They vanish, and you get your piece. Ethan shook his head. No, they don't get off that easy. His voice was ice. I have a plan, one that will ruin them without anyone suspecting me. Tony's lips curled into a knowing grin. That's the Ethan I know, always thinking ahead. He leaned back, swirling his drink. All right, we'll play it your way. Just tell me what you need. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. I'm in, he said reluctantly. But we need to cover every angle. No mistakes. There won't be any mistakes, Ethan assured him. The weight of his decision settled, solidifying in his mind. This ends now. On my terms. Tony lifted his glass in a toast. To making things right. Daniel hesitated before joining. The sound of their glasses clinking in the dim light sealed the deal. The plan was set in motion. At a bustling coffee shop across town, Vanessa sat across from Derek, her mood sour. The hum of casual conversations filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension between them. She sipped her latte, distracted, her gaze flickering toward the two men seated at the next table. They were hunched over a map, speaking in hushed tones. It's prime real estate, one of them said, tapping a circled spot. We need to move fast. Vanessa leaned slightly forward, listening without making it obvious. But then, the words registered. Her stomach dropped. She recognized the address. That's my house, she blurted out before she could stop herself. The men froze, exchanging sharp glances before turning to her. Excuse me, one of them asked. Vanessa straightened, feigning a polite smile. The property you're discussing, it belongs to me. The second man frowned. Your house? Or your husband's house? A flicker of hesitation crossed her face before she composed herself. Technically, it's my husband's, but I can sell it. The men exchanged skeptical looks. One of them smirked. That's so? Vanessa nodded quickly, eager to salvage what she could from the mess her life had become. I have influence over him. If you're interested, I can make it happen. The men leaned back, considering. Derek, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. His tone was low, sharp. Vanessa, what the hell are you doing? She turned to him, irritation flashing across her face. We need this, Derek. We lost our jobs. Our money is running out. This is a way back in. Derek shook his head, jaw tightening. You really think selling Ethan's house under him is a good idea? He'll destroy you. Vanessa's eyes burned with defiance. Not if he doesn't see it coming. The men at the table exchanged a glance before one of them gave a slow, knowing nod. All right, he said. We'll be in touch. As they stood to leave, Vanessa exhaled, a smirk playing on her lips. She wasn't finished yet. Vanessa's fingers tightened around her cup, her knuckles whitening as she listened. I'm not reconciling, she said, her voice flat. I'm filing for divorce. I'll get the house, and then I'll sell. The first man studied her carefully, his tone measured. Even if you go through with the divorce, you might only get half. Courts typically split assets. The rest stays with him. Vanessa's jaw tensed. Half? Why should I settle for that? It's my house. The second man gave a casual shrug. That's how it works. Unless you can prove something drastic, the court won't award you more. Vanessa's mind raced, working through possibilities. What if I convince him to agree to more? There has to be a way to make this work in my favor. The first man leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a more strategic tone. Timing is everything. If you push now, and he agrees before the property's value spikes, you could come out ahead. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. How much of a spike are we talking? It could increase 20-fold, the man said, his tone laced with calculation. But you have to act fast, before anyone else knows what's coming. Vanessa pressed her lips together, nodding slowly as she ran the numbers in her head. If she played this right, she wouldn't just walk away with a settlement. She could win. Her pulse quickened at the thought. But as the excitement grew, so did a gnawing worry. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her fingers against the table. "I don't have that kind of money," she admitted, a rare moment of hesitation creeping in. The two men exchanged glances before one of them leaned forward, his expression sharp, assessing. "You don't need the money yet," he said smoothly. Vanessa frowned. "Then how?" The quieter man finally spoke, his voice slow and deliberate. "Tony Sullivan." Vanessa's stomach twisted. She had heard the name before, spoken in hushed tones, always with a warning attached. "I know who he is," she muttered. "He's dangerous." Before she could say more, Derek's hand clamped around her arm, his grip tightening. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Vanessa, listen to me. You don't want to owe someone like Tony. If you can't pay him back, he won't just take what you owe. He'll take everything. He'll liquidate you." A shiver ran down Vanessa's spine, but she pushed it aside. She needed a way out. She yanked her arm free, her voice trembling but firm. "How much would I need?" The first man adjusted his tie, offering a smile that was all business but devoid of warmth. "That's for you to decide. Tony can lend you whatever it takes to make this happen. But remember, he always collects. He never forgets." Vanessa's heart pounded as the weight of the situation fully sank in. The men rose, their movements smooth and deliberate. One of them slid a card across the table. "Call us if you get the house," he said coolly. Vanessa clutched the card in her hand, frozen in place as they walked away. Her fingers tightened around it as she stared at the name, her mind spinning through possibilities. After a moment, she exhaled sharply and nodded to herself. "I'll call," she whispered. 2 days later, Ethan sat in a waiting room, his hands clasped tightly, his patience wearing thin. This was supposed to be a joint counseling session, but he already knew how it would go. A door opened, and Jessica, the counselor, stepped out, her expression neutral but firm. "Mr. Grayson," she said, folding her hands in front of her. "I've asked you before, are you truly willing to give Vanessa another chance? Reconciliation is possible, but only if you're both open to it." Ethan let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Lady, reading textbooks and running role-play scenarios might make you a counselor, but it doesn't make you an expert on people." Jessica's lips pressed together, her voice steady. "Mr. Grayson, I am a professional, and if you're serious about moving forward, you need to approach this with an open mind." Ethan rose from his seat, towering over her desk. "You're not listening. Vanessa is a liar. She's been lying to me since the beginning. I'm not falling for her act." Jessica frowned, her tone growing sharper. "Have you even tried to understand her?" Ethan scoffed. "No. I'm done understanding someone who's been manipulating me all along." He paused, then smirked. "But if you want to play games, let's make it interesting." Jessica raised a skeptical brow. "Games? A bet?" Ethan leaned forward, his smile cold. "If you can prove me wrong, I'll keep coming to these sessions. But if I'm right, you do exactly as I say." A Marine's word. Jessica hesitated, clearly thrown off by the proposition. But curiosity got the better of her. "Fine. If I win, you continue counseling. If you win," she trailed off, unsure. "You'll follow my lead," Ethan finished. She hesitated a moment longer, then nodded. "Agreed." The door opened, and Vanessa sauntered in, her heels clicking against the floor. She had dressed for effect, a low-cut top, a skirt that barely met decency standards. She tossed her hair over her shoulder, scanning the room with disinterest before dropping into the chair across from Ethan. Jessica forced a polite smile. "Vanessa, welcome. Let's begin." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Spare me the formalities. Let's just cut to the chase." Jessica blinked, but nodded for her to continue. Vanessa turned to Ethan, her expression venomous. "He wants a divorce? Fine. Give me the house, and we're done." Jessica blinked. "But Vanessa," you said. "I don't care." Vanessa crossed her arms. "I cheated, and I don't regret it." Her lips curled into a smirk. "My lover? At least he's good in bed. Unlike this toy soldier." Ethan remained silent, his expression unreadable. Vanessa leaned back with a sneer. "And your sick daughter? She can rot for all I care." Your dog? Derek and I kicked it for fun. Jessica's face drained of color. Vanessa, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is a counseling session. Vanessa barked out a laugh. I lied. I don't want reconciliation. I want the house. And I'm done. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Silence filled the room. Jessica sat frozen, the shock clear in her eyes. Slowly, she turned to Ethan, her voice almost disbelieving. Does she realize she just ruined any chance of sympathy in court? Ethan exhaled and rose slowly, straightening his jacket. His piercing gaze locked onto Jessica, his expression cold and unwavering. You don't get it, he said smoothly. She never had a chance to begin with. Jessica sat there, speechless, as Ethan strode toward the door and walked out without looking back. Ethan's voice remained smooth, edged with restrained frustration. This isn't about reconciliation, he said coolly. It's about power, control, and making sure I get what's mine. Jessica opened her mouth as if to argue, but no words came. Instead, her eyes softened, her professional mask slipping. Please, Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling. I can help you. Ethan's expression remained unreadable, but his next words were firm. You'll do as I say, right? For a fleeting moment, fear flickered in her eyes. She looked away, nodding slightly, unsure if she was agreeing out of duty or self-preservation. Ethan gave her one last glance, his stare as cold as steel. I'll be back. With that, he turned and left, leaving Jessica standing in stunned silence, caught between shock and regret. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Judge Lawson reviewed the revised divorce petition. Unbeknownst to Vanessa, Lawson was Jessica's uncle, and after hearing about her counseling outburst, he had agreed to scrutinize her case more closely. Vanessa sat at the plaintiff's table, arms crossed, her expression locked in defiance. Across from her, Ethan sat calmly, exuding quiet confidence, his focus unshaken. Judge Lawson cleared his throat, his tone sharp and unwavering. Mrs. Grayson, your petition is contradictory. First, you demanded counseling and reconciliation. Now, you're requesting a divorce with no alimony, but you still want the house? Explain. Vanessa forced a tight smile. I've decided I only want the house, Your Honor. It has sentimental value. Lawson's expression hardened. Sentimental value? A house you neither maintained nor respected. He set the papers down with an audible slap. Let me be clear. You'll receive 50% of your legal entitlement, nothing more. If you want the house, you'll pay Mr. Grayson's price. This court does not entertain entitlement. Vanessa's composure cracked, but she quickly recovered, her voice sharp with indignation. I'm not paying a dime. That house is mine. Lawson's eyes narrowed. Incorrect. The house belongs to Mr. Grayson. You can buy it at his price, or you can take your share of the settlement. Additionally, I am granting Mr. Grayson full custody of Sophia. If you wish to see her, visitation will be supervised. Mr. Grayson has also waived child support. The gavel struck with finality. Ethan allowed the faintest smirk to touch his lips as Vanessa's face twisted in fury and disbelief. The fight was over, and she had lost. Vanessa sat at her kitchen table, staring at the phone. She hesitated only a moment before dialing the number from the coffee shop. The line rang twice before a man answered. Yeah, it's Vanessa, she said, her voice unsteady. Is the price still expected to increase 20-fold? A brief pause. Then the man replied, his tone casual but urgent. Yes, but you need to act fast. Someone's already approached Ethan. If you wait, you'll lose your chance. Vanessa's pulse spiked. How soon? Now, the man said bluntly. It's now or never. Vanessa inhaled sharply before ending the call. Her fingers trembled as she dialed Derek. We need to see Tony, she said as soon as he picked up. We need the money. Immediately. 600 grand? Derek sounded doubtful. Are you sure this will work? We don't have a choice, Vanessa snapped. Tony is our only option. If we don't act now, we'll lose everything. Derek let out a long, frustrated sigh. Fine. I'll set it up. Minutes later, they were seated in Tony Sullivan's dimly lit office. The air was thick with the scent of cigars, the atmosphere suffocating. Tony leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he examined them. I can give you the money, he said slowly. But I don't do handouts. Everything has a cost. Derek tensed. What's the deal? Tony's smirk was barely perceptible. Mortgage the house to me for 300 grand. The rest you pay back within a month. Vanessa glanced at Derek before nodding. We'll do it. Tony's smirk widened. Good. But let me be clear, failure to repay comes with consequences. The next day, Vanessa and Derek sat stiffly across from Ethan in the lawyer's office. The air was thick with unspoken hostility, the weight of their decisions settling like lead. A stack of paperwork sat between them. Only the signatures remained. Vanessa pushed a check across the table, her fingers trembling slightly. $600,000 for the house, she said, trying to sound confident. But there was a hesitation in her voice, a sliver of uncertainty. Ethan took the check, barely glancing at it before slipping it into his coat pocket. His expression remained unreadable, the silence stretching uncomfortably long. Vanessa swallowed, then tried again, her voice softer. I'm sorry, she said, struggling to hold his gaze. I shouldn't have cheated. I lied about being pregnant. It was all just to make you lose control. She exhaled shakily. I'm sorry for everything. Derek shifted awkwardly, his gaze fixed on the table. He had no words. Ethan remained motionless for a moment, then finally pushed his chair back, the scrape against the floor loud in the still room. He stood, his gaze locked onto Vanessa with unsettling steadiness. Vanessa tried once more, her voice firmer. It's over now? I'm glad it's over. She swallowed hard. I really do wish you the best, Ethan. Ethan's next words cut through the room like a knife. You should see Sophia. Vanessa's face froze, confusion flickering in her eyes. Sophia? She's in the hospital, Ethan said, his voice void of warmth. Getting dialysis. She almost lost her kidneys because of an infection you ignored. Vanessa's breath hitched. Ethan continued, his tone sharper. She's your daughter, Vanessa, and you owe her more than empty words. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came out. Ethan exhaled, his expression unreadable. I'm done here. He turned without another word, striding toward the door. But just before walking out, he paused, his voice dropping low. You should think about what you really owe her. Then he was gone, leaving Vanessa and Derek in stunned silence, trapped in the consequences of their own making. Vanessa sat on her couch, swirling her wine glass in slow circles, the dim light of the apartment glinting off the liquid. She leaned back against Derek's arm, the weight of the day pressing against her chest. This might actually work out, she mused, staring into her drink. Derek smirked, raising his own glass. What? The house? The money? Or finally being rid of Ethan? Vanessa gave a satisfied chuckle. All of it. Everything's finally coming together. Derek arched a skeptical brow. Unless we just walked into another mess. Vanessa brushed off his concern with a casual wave. We've got this. I should check in with those guys, make sure everything's moving along. Derek gave her a look. You really think they're still reliable? They better be, she said, dialing the number. The call rang. No answer. Frowning, she tried again. Still nothing. Maybe they're busy, Derek offered, watching the tension tighten her shoulders. Maybe, she muttered, setting the phone down. I'll try tomorrow. The next morning, Vanessa grabbed her phone the moment she woke up, dialing with increasing urgency. Ring. Ring. No answer. Again. Nothing. Her stomach clenched. Why the hell won't they pick up? Derek groggily sat up, rubbing his eyes. What's going on now? They're not answering. Vanessa snapped, pacing the room. Something's wrong. Maybe you're overthinking it. No. She shook her head, already grabbing her purse. I need answers. Derek groaned, but followed as she stormed out. The address from the business card led them to a grimy strip club, the neon sign flickering above the near-empty parking lot. This can't be right, Vanessa whispered, dread creeping into her voice. Derek let out a sharp laugh, but it was devoid of humor. A strip club? You've got to be kidding me. Vanessa's legs gave out, and she sank onto the pavement, her face twisting in anger and disbelief. I can't believe this. I fell for it. I fell for it. Derek stood over her, his frustration boiling over. You fell for it? We fell for it. His jaw clenched. I should have known better, but here we are. Vanessa looked up, her eyes wet with unshed tears. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to get scammed like this? Derek ran a hand over his face, exhaling heavily. Look around, Vanessa. This was doomed from the start. Vanessa pushed herself up, glaring. Don't put this all on me. You're just as much at fault. The tension crackled between them, But finally, Vanessa straightened, brushing off her clothes. Let's go. There's nothing more to do here. The drive back was suffocatingly silent. At the apartment, Vanessa slumped into a chair, drained. I don't know what to do now. Derek lingered near the door, his hand on the knob. Neither do I. After a long pause, he finally spoke. You ever think Ethan was behind this? Vanessa stiffened. What? Derek folded his arms. Those guys knew too much. The house, the deal, what if they were working with him? Vanessa's anger flared. You think he set us up? Derek nodded grimly. It all adds up. We played right into his hands. Vanessa seethed. That bastard played us. Her nails dug into her palm. He conned us both. Derek exhaled. We should have seen it coming. Vanessa grabbed her phone, her fury pushing past her exhaustion. I'm not done yet. We'll figure this out. She spent hours making calls to her real estate contacts. One by one, the responses came back. No one had heard of a mall project. There was no development. Nothing. Vanessa slammed her phone onto the counter, her breath unsteady. It was all a lie. Derek's face darkened. We got played. Vanessa turned away, her body rigid with rage. He made fools of us, Derek. But I'm not letting him get away with it. Derek eyed her warily. How? Vanessa's eyes locked onto the window, her expression hard. Give me time to think. 3 weeks passed. The pressure on Vanessa mounted. That morning, she received a text. Time's up. Pay now. Her stomach twisted. She typed back, promising to settle the debt soon. Immediately, she started calling, desperately trying to rush the sale of the house. The news was bad. The market had slowed. Finding a buyer quickly was unlikely. Panicking, she took the first offer she got, a low-ball deal, selling the house for half its value. She wired the money to Tony instantly, hoping it would be enough. Then another text came. Not enough. You still owe me. Vanessa's hands shook. What more does he want? Tony's demands didn't stop. Vanessa turned to Derek, her voice cracking. I don't know what else to do. We sold the house. We have nothing left. Derek's face was pale, his hands rubbing his temples. I'll sell my house, he said quietly. Vanessa's eyes widened. Derek, no. You can't. I can, he said, his voice firm. If it's the only way to get Tony off our backs, then that's what I'll do. His gaze darkened. Otherwise, we're done for. Vanessa swallowed hard. She wanted to argue. She wanted to scream. But she had no options left. The next day, Derek sold his house. The last thing they owned. By nightfall, the money was gone. And so were they. No home. No savings. No way forward. Just the weight of a debt that would never truly disappear. Vanessa sat on the couch, swirling the wine in her glass, her mind spinning as she tried to push away the overwhelming sense of defeat. The apartment around them was barren, just like their future. Derek sat beside her, rubbing his face. We've lost everything, Vanessa. His voice was hollow. What now? She stared out the window, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know. But even as she said it, her mind worked desperately, searching for an escape. Derek leaned against the counter, shaking his head. This is spiraling out of control. What happens if we get caught? Vanessa's jaw tightened. We won't get caught. And we can't let Ethan get away with what he did to us. Derek hesitated, his unease growing. But abducting Sophia? That's too far, Vanessa. We can't come back from that. She stepped closer, her voice sharp. You're right. We can't. But neither can he. He stole everything from me. He has to pay. Derek inhaled deeply, staring at her as if searching for any hesitation. There was none. His shoulders dropped, and a cold look settled into his eyes. Fine, he muttered. Let's do it. That night, they sat in the dim glow of the apartment, laying out every detail of their plan. Derek fidgeted, clearly uneasy. This feels wrong, he admitted. Taking Sophia? This is risky. Vanessa leaned in, eyes flashing. We're not hurting her. We just need leverage. Ethan has to know we mean business. Derek shook his head. And if we get caught? Kidnapping is a felony. Vanessa exhaled sharply. I'm her mother. If it comes to that, I'll say I just wanted to see her. Derek sighed, finally resigned. All right. But if this blows up, we're done. Vanessa's voice was firm. It won't. We're going to make him pay. The next evening, Vanessa and Derek pulled into the parking lot of an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. The rusted structure loomed in the darkness, flickering streetlights casting eerie shadows. Vanessa inhaled deeply. This is it. We can't mess this up. Derek nodded stiffly. A figure emerged from the far side of the lot, moving toward them with slow, deliberate steps. The man wore a baseball cap low over his face, and in his hand was a small envelope. Vanessa rolled down the window as he approached. Do you have her? The man tossed the envelope into the car and stepped back. She's inside. Everything's set. Derek ripped it open. A photograph of Sophia stared back at them, her eyes wide with fear, her small frame curled into a corner. Vanessa's stomach twisted. The money, the man demanded. Vanessa glanced at Derek, and he handed over the cash. The stack disappeared into the man's jacket without hesitation. He lingered just long enough for his stare to carry a warning before turning on his heel and vanishing into the darkness. The following night, Vanessa and Derek returned to the factory. The air smelled of rust and decay as they made their way through the creaking metal gates. Near the back wall, an old van sat in the shadows. Inside, a figure slumped against the interior, hands bound, face hidden beneath a black mask. The shallow, ragged breathing broke the silence. Derek's voice was tight. Is it her? Vanessa's heart pounded as she studied the figure. The frame, the posture, it had to be. It's her, she murmured, more to herself than to Derek. They moved the girl carefully into their car. The ride back was silent. Vanessa gripped her phone with trembling fingers and dialed. A low, icy voice cut through the static. Vanessa, she exhaled, steadying herself. I have the girl. A pause. Then, Ethan's voice, deadly calm. You think I'll hand over money without proof? Vanessa exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter. You'll get proof when I see the money. That's the deal. Derek fidgeted beside her, eyes darting to the bound girl in the back seat. Another pause. Then, Ethan's voice, sharp and commanding. 700,000. You'll have it. But I want the location now. Vanessa's pulse quickened. This was it, the point of no return. Meet me at the old mill on Riverside, she said evenly. Tomorrow night. Midnight. Another silence. Then, Ethan's curt response. I'll be there. Vanessa hung up, her hand trembling. Derek's whispered question broke the silence. You think he'll show? Vanessa glanced at the girl in the back seat. A flicker of doubt stirred in her chest, but she shoved it down. He'll come, she said firmly. He always does. Midnight. The crunch of gravel beneath their tires sent a chill up Vanessa's spine as they pulled up to the old mill. A dense mist clung to the air, making everything feel heavier. Ahead, Ethan stood near a dilapidated barn, his silhouette imposing. A large duffel bag rested at his side. Vanessa's breath hitched. This is it, she muttered. Derek's voice was grim. We make the exchange and leave. Quick and clean. Vanessa stepped out, gripping the girl's arm and pulling her from the back seat with Derek's help. Ethan took a slow step forward, his voice level. Let me see her face. Vanessa hesitated, her fingers twitching as she reached for the mask. Slowly, she pulled it away. Ethan's entire demeanor changed. His face darkened. His eyes turned to steel. His voice cut through the night. Who the hell is this? Vanessa's stomach dropped. She turned to Derek, her breath coming in shallow gasps. This was supposed to be Sophia, she stammered. Ethan stepped forward, his movements slow, deliberate. You kidnapped the wrong girl. Vanessa's breath hitched. No, that's not. Ethan tilted his head slightly, watching her unravel. His smirk was slow, dangerous. You thought you were in control, he said. You thought you were playing me. His voice dripped with amusement. But I was watching you. I knew what you were planning. Vanessa's body went rigid. You let this happen, she whispered. Ethan's smirk didn't falter. I let you bury yourself. The sudden wail of sirens shattered the night. Vanessa spun, panic surging. Red and blue lights flashed, squad cars screeching to a halt. Derek's face twisted in horror. You set us up. Ethan gave a slow nod, stepping aside as officers flooded the lot. You stole a child, he said coldly. And now, you're going to pay for it. Ethan's expression turned to ice. His gaze locked onto Vanessa, his voice dropping to a low growl. Supposed to be? He repeated, his patience razor thin. You've been lying to me. Derek stepped forward, desperation bleeding into his voice. It's not what it looks like, Ethan. There's been a mistake. I don't care about your excuses. Ethan cut in, his voice deadly calm. I want Sophia. Or I walk. The girl in the back seat squirmed, her muffled cries slicing through the tense air. Vanessa's hands trembled as she whispered under her breath, "This can't be happening." Ethan clenched his grip on the bag at his side, his patience wearing thin. Figure this out. Now. Before anyone could respond, the screech of tires shattered the silence. Bright headlights flooded the scene as a black SUV skidded to a stop beside them. The doors flew open, and Tony stepped out, his large frame backlit by the glow. His face was a storm of barely restrained fury, his gaze locked onto Vanessa. Behind him, two enforcers dragged a man from the back seat, his face bloodied, swollen. The man gasped, his hand trembling as he pointed at Vanessa and Derek. They paid me to do it, he stammered. It was them. Tony didn't even look at the man. His cold stare remained fixed on Vanessa as he approached, his voice laced with venom. You screwed up, lady. Vanessa's breath hitched, panic tightening around her throat. I didn't mean to. You tried to abduct your own daughter and extort money from Ethan? Tony interrupted, his voice darkening with every word. You've hit a new low. Ethan stepped forward, his expression unreadable as he and Tony exchanged a knowing glance. You thought you could play Ethan and just walk away? Tony continued, his voice a menacing growl. Ethan is family. His enemies are mine. Vanessa stood frozen, her chest tightening under the weight of Tony's words. Derek instinctively moved to shield her, but it was useless. Tony turned to his men. Take them. Vanessa barely had time to react before rough hands grabbed her arms, forcing them behind her back. Derek struggled, cursing, but it didn't matter. Within moments, they were shoved toward the waiting SUV. Tony's voice was final, deadly. This is over. You're done. The SUV doors slammed shut, and the vehicle disappeared into the night. Tony exhaled slowly, turning back to Ethan. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge. They crossed me, Ethan. This isn't just about you anymore. Ethan didn't move, his jaw tightening. Tony stepped closer, his voice dropping lower. You have your reputation. I have mine. But when someone comes after my family, my daughter, it's personal. There's no walking away from this. Ethan's expression darkened. I have a daughter to protect too. If they're let go, they'll come after her again. His voice turned colder. That's a risk I can't take. Tony's gaze sharpened. The unspoken agreement passed between them in silence. There was no going back. 3 weeks later, the golden light of late afternoon filtered through the trees as Ethan and Sophia walked along the riverbank. The gentle rush of water over the rocks blended with Sophia's laughter, the happy panting of their dog, Max, filling the air. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. Sophia was recovering. The darkness of the past felt farther away. He watched as she tossed a stick for Max, the Labrador bounding forward with endless energy. Ethan allowed himself a rare smile. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He hesitated before answering. Ethan, he greeted, his tone steady. Hey, it's Daniel. The voice on the other end was cheerful. Just wanted to thank you, man. Things with Jessica went great. She's incredible. I owe you for setting us up. Ethan smirked faintly. Glad it worked out, Daniel. You're a lifesaver, really, Daniel added with enthusiasm. Talk soon. The line clicked off. Ethan pocketed his phone, his gaze returning to Sophia. Max nudged his hand, looking up expectantly. Ethan crouched down, scratching behind the dog's ears. No one messes with my dog and walks away, he murmured. Max wagged his tail as if in agreement. Miles away, the boat rocked gently on the open sea. The rhythmic lapping of waves against the hull was the only sound in the silence. Vanessa and Derek sat side by side, their hands bound behind their backs, thick concrete blocks chained to their feet. Their breaths came quick and shallow, panic carving into their faces. A tall man loomed over them, his expression cold, calculating. He watched them squirm, a cruel smirk playing at his lips. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low, sharp rasp. You were trouble from the start. Now, you're just a problem solved. He yanked Vanessa up first, ignoring her sharp gasp. Derek was pulled up next, just as roughly. They struggled, but the weight of the concrete left them powerless. The man shoved them toward the boat's edge. The icy wind whipped against their faces, a cruel final warning. Vanessa's voice cracked. No, please, don't do this. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The man grabbed the backs of their shirts. With a single push, they tumbled into the black water. The sea swallowed them instantly, the weight of the concrete dragging them down. Vanessa's lungs burned as she fought, as she kicked, but it was pointless. The darkness wrapped around her, suffocating. Beside her, Derek's frantic struggles weakened. His eyes wild, terrified. The freezing water pressed against them, silencing their desperation. Then, nothing. The surface of the ocean remained calm. The boat rocked gently as if nothing had happened. Tony lit a cigar, exhaling a slow stream of smoke into the crisp night air. His men stood silently nearby, their task complete. He turned toward Ethan, speaking without emotion. "It's done." Ethan nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Good." The two men exchanged a brief, knowing look before parting ways. Tony's reputation remained unshaken, and Ethan's daughter was finally safe.